Hello, everybody. Welcome to Step into the Portal. My name is the Brandt, and I am very excited because I have people here with me from Fantasy Flight Games, designers and rules people, and we are going to chat Marvel Champions, which I think there's no secret for people who watch this channel that Marvel Champions is one of, if not my favorite game of all time. So getting a chance to talk to the people who work on the game is an absolute delight. So let's go around the circle and everybody can introduce themselves, starting with you, Alex.
Oh, okay. So my name is Alex Werner. I am the Fantasy Flight game rules specialist as my title. The main thing I do for Marvel Champions, at least that people would know me for, is I've been the one answering rules questions directly. I'm the one that is in charge of our email inbox, but I also do rules review during the development process.
Nice. Go ahead, Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Fanchi. I'm a senior game designer with FFG, and I'm currently working on Marvel Champions.
Awesome. And Caleb.
That's me. I'm Caleb Grace, senior game designer at Fantasy Flight. I've been on Marvel Champions from the beginning and very fortunate to work with Tony and Alex. This is one of the best teams I've been able to work with in my tenure at the studio. So we're excited to be here.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. I'll also throw out a couple other things with Caleb and Tony here. So I actually have a podcast that I put on that I always kind of announce on the channel here, but it's called the Right Brain Rollers podcast. And it's a podcast I do with Eric Summer. A lot of people might know him from the Dice Tower podcast. And so Eric and I have teamed up to start a new podcast where we review board games and things. We haven't actually talked a lot of Marvel Champions at all, but have reviewed the Star Wars deck building game, which Caleb designed and came out last year, and also got a chance to play Unfinished Business, which is the expansion to Outer Rim, which Tony worked on the design for that as well. So please, if you haven't listened to the Right Brain Rollers, go check it out. We're just a few episodes in, but Eric and I combined have over 20 years of experience reviewing board games. So it's exciting to work with him because he's awesome. So check that out, and you can hear about Caleb and Tony's other games as well. All right, let's get to some hard-hitting questions. What do you say?
Yeah,
Hit me.
I'm ready for it.
All right. So a rules update has been pending. In fact, almost 2 years ago, I think, maybe a year and a half.
Exactly 2 years.
Okay, yeah, I talked to Caleb and to Michael Boggs, and I know the rules update was kind of like pending or happening or starting the process, which it was very much alluded to that it takes a long time, and so hard work. Thank you for all the time, and I know a lot goes into that, but it has released. The rules reference 1.5 has released, and so people can check that out. So that's what we want to chat about on this episode and kind of focus on those kind of things. So let me give you the first question. What is the process for answering rules questions that come from the community? How can people get answers to their rules questions?
So if you have a rules question that you would like to send to us to get an official answer, there is a link on our support page. If you go to fantasyflightgames.com and click on Marvel Champions and go to support, like you'll find a place to send rules. And what's interesting about that is so eventually what happens is you enter your question and it just gets shunted into in someone's inbox. Like it'll just show up. For the longest time, that was my inbox. And this system, so I've been at the studio now for like 11 and a half years, and that system had not changed in 11 and a half years. And so, I used to work on the Lord of the Rings before Marvel Champions, and I used to get a couple questions a week. It's no problem. I could take care of those real quickly, fire off an answer and get a happy reply. And it was just a great thing. But that's back when our initial print runs were in the 5,000 to 6,000 category. Marvel Champions, our initial print runs are more in the 50,000 category. Right. And so you can imagine the volume of questions has increased significantly to the point where I had to reach out to my manager and say, look, I can either answer rules questions or I can make new product. I can't do both anymore because There's so much. And so that prompted like an audit. We did this like internal audit to see like how many rules questions are we actually getting. And they're like, okay, yeah, he's not just being dramatic. Like there really is a significant increase here. And that's where we started to review this process. And eventually Alex volunteered what I believe was supposed to be an interim solution at first. And it's become more of a permanent thing because she's so good at it, and it's just working out really well, where now those questions go to her. And if she knows, like, because some of the questions we get are kind of obvious, for her, she can just fire off an answer. If they're a little more complicated, then we have a weekly meeting where Tony and Alex and I will sit down together. And Alex is like super organized. She has this amazing spreadsheet that has like
Nice.
every rules question we've ever gotten and all the answers. And this is like, I'm taking notes because that's where I would screw up in the past. Is I would be like, I answered this question once before, but it was like a year ago. I can't remember what I said. So here's what I'm going to say this time. And then someone would point out, like, you just contradicted yourself.
Oh
I'd
no.
be like, I'm sorry. Doesn't happen with Alex because she's super organized and just keeps us moving. So I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of talk about it because I found that history interesting of just how many more rules questions we get now and how we had to update our process as a result. So just so grateful to have Alex on the team now holding it down.
Nice. Well, Caleb, now that I know those aren't going to your inbox, I won't send you 500 messages a day with rules questions.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the fun's gone. I'm sorry.
So Alex, you're getting those instead. So how has that process gone? How has that been answering community rules questions? What can you tell us?
Honestly, I would like to, if I could summarize it, I would say it's been very enlightening. It's so before I started doing rules questions, I actually didn't know a lot about Marvel Champions. It was a couple of months after my hire date actually that I started I started answering rules questions for both Marvel Champions and Arkham Horror, the card game, which I am still doing to this day. And through that process, I've learned so much more about the game than I had on my own. I did have copies to try and play on my own, and while it's possible, there is so much content now, and so much still that I am discovering. So it helps a lot being able to read these rules questions about these specific cards, go look at these specific cards, try to understand what heroes these cards belong to and how they work with them. So that has been really cool. The community I've found is very passionate.
It's a good term.
Yeah, well, they love this game so much, and it's really cool to see what kind of stuff that they can come up with. And I think it's a good illustrator that I have been, like Caleb said, I've been keeping track of every single rules question I've answered since I started. I started around late April 2022, and since then I've recorded 575 answered rules questions for Marvel Champions.
Nice.
Honestly, it's crazy to think about. It's been a year and a few months since, and so much more is coming out for the game, and everyone's so excited, and it makes me more excited seeing everyone being so happy to play this game and be a part of its community.
And
Nice.
there's a lot of rules questions.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's really good to know that, like, whatever you're having meetings, would you say weekly-ish? You're having meetings to sit down and answer those. So then we know we're kind of getting some timely answers, which is super helpful. It's interesting for me. So both, on the channel here, I stream the game pretty consistently. Like the goal of the channel is to cover a lot of games, but Marvel Champions is certainly a centerpiece. And I don't know if you all know, but like I really like showing off the game at 3 and 4 players because most people don't. And I am an extreme people person. I am an extrovert to no end. And so playing with other people is so fun and having more people around the table. And I'm also a math teacher and a mathematician, which is very rules and very, follow the steps.
Yeah.
But it's funny when it comes to rules in games, I'm just not as stuck on them. Like I don't mind making a ruling in the moment and moving on. And I think that's part of the keeping the audience entertained, keeping the game moving. Like I feel like it's not very exciting to get stuck in rules questions.
Yeah.
But I know there's people that can't. It's hard for them to experience a game without knowing what they're supposed to do. Like that's very
Right.
key. So thank you, Alex, for getting that back, and thank you, team, for responding to people, in a timely manner, comparatively. So
Yeah.
that's been
That's
Brandt,
one of the nice things about cooperative games is you can just decide as a group what we're going to do with this rule right now. And if it really bothers you wanting to know exactly how it's supposed to work, you can always follow up with us after the game and we'll happily answer the question.
Yeah. What were you saying, Caleb?
Oh, I was just saying, I feel like you and I are very much on the same wavelength when it comes to rules. Sometimes it's like just, I personally like just put the experience first, like just keep the game moving and have fun. And that's why I think like Tony and Alex are such great additions to the team, because they're very sharp with the rules. Not like they're killjoys or nothing, just really good at keeping track of that stuff. So I think I really like this team for the way we balance each other out.
Yeah, no, I do think it's important. I mean, it's not necessarily my mentality when I'm playing games, but being a teacher, I know all the different places people come at when they're learning things, when they're going through things, and so I definitely can understand where people want those, like they get enjoyment out of knowing what they're doing, So I think that's a really key piece. All right, so why do we need an update for Marvel Champions? Wasn't everything perfect? There were no questions. We didn't need anything resolved. So what was the necessity of this update? What would you say there, Tony?
Well, we had a number of goals with the update. First and foremost was, given that this was about 2 years in coming, there were a lot of products released in that time. And so we wanted to make sure that all the newest keywords, the newest game terminology, like the word find, were included in the rules reference. So there's one place you can go to find everything. We also wanted to try to clarify a lot of the most common rules questions that we were getting through Alex's receiving in the inbox. That was really eye-opening in terms of what the most common questions were and where there was ambiguities within the rules that we really wanted to address. And so I've had a spreadsheet of updates to the rules that I've been working on since Alex came aboard, and have just been every meeting, if something comes up that is a common rule that week, I'll throw it on the spreadsheet and know that this is something we need to update in the next rules update. And then on top of that, we had a handful of errata that we wanted to issue. Most of them are very minor technical things. There were a couple that we did for balance and to keep the design space open for Caleb and I going forward. And then we also wanted to put in some of our most frequently asked questions as things that people can look up and find the answer to.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like that's a big piece, is having something to reference. I know some people have said like it keeps updating and now I have to know a new set of rules, and maybe I haven't played the game in a few weeks or a few months, and now there's these new rules to figure out. But I think that's what's nice about a rules reference is a place you can go, and maybe alluding to what we were saying earlier, which is you can go back later, like obviously there's times a reference is nice because you look things up. I have to give you major credit for the timing chart. I know that's the thing of like the timing of how things happen. That was huge for the community. I know that was really important. So how long did it take? And who was specifically working on this update?
So I was the one who took the lead on the writing of it. Caleb and Alex both reviewed the rules before we finally published them. I started working on it back in November of last year. And I worked on it basically full-time for probably 4 to 6 weeks. And then since then, it was a part-time thing as I was working on the next wave. I was also doing rules on the side. And obviously we have approvals processes and things we have to go to, and that's why it was only recently released. But
Nice.
it was quite the investment into hours. And that's really the most difficult thing about doing the rules reference is finding the time to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and just kind of iterating out all of those rules and collecting all those things.
Yeah,
Um,
we got feedback from a lot of people. We put it out to our play testers to get all their feedback and tried to address as many thoughts and questions as we could.
So you said like future proofing for upcoming ideas and things. Obviously, I know you can't spoil any of those things, but what are some of those ideas of thinking about? To me, that strikes me as something like Cosmo, who could affect any deck. So
Exactly.
suddenly it limits, what you could create for an any deck for a side deck. Are there other examples like that?
Yeah, Cosmo is the big one in that regard. Like I remember when I was working on the Mojo Mania scenario pack, and I had Spiral's show deck, which is a deck, and so I had to put in the rules specifically that it was immune to player card effects because Cosmo has the ability to wreak havoc
Right.
on any little side deck that we want to do. Storm's environment weather deck is technically a deck, and so all of these things we were subject to Cosmo's tinkering, and so we just wanted to make sure that Cosmo was really only dealing with the main decks in the game, which are the encounter deck and the player decks. The other major balance errata we issued was Go for Champions. It's a very powerful card, and in solo it was probably well balanced, but when you get 4 players who are all playing champions and are all running this card, that leads to some game breaking states and just makes the game not fun anymore. And while we do often subscribe to the idea that it is the player's choice to whether they want to play with really powerful combos or not, we felt this one was just so over the top that we wanted to address it.
Who would do that? Who would play 4 champions and everybody runs Go for Champions? And then, wait, if you have Nova, you could recur it with the Miss Marvel ally? I can't even imagine. And then say you went up against Ronin and Ronin could deal no damage. So your Go for Champions play blocks, I don't know, 84 damage in one turn. Let's just say happened live
Really hypothetical.
somewhere.
No one would ever do that in practice.
We called it My First Ronin because it just made Ronin kind of took away his ability to just attack you over and over and over again, So.
Well, he is one of the easier villains in the game right now. So.
It's true. Well, I assume the Cosmo nerf was, because Doctor Strange.
Yep, he was part of it, but wasn't the main culprit. The biggest reason was just future proofing, allowing us to do side decks that would not be subject to Cosmo's interference.
Yeah, and I should clarify for people. So the Cosmo update is that Cosmo used to say when he thwarts or attacks, you name a card and discard the top of any deck, and if it is that card type, he takes no consequential damage. But now you have to specifically do a player deck or an encounter deck. Is that correct?
Yep.
So that is the thing that we are talking about there. Yeah, you talked about like the major goals for the update. What were some of the major clarifications that we did in terms of rules? Or maybe, Alex, maybe some of those were the issues that you were seeing were very common that needed clarification?
Yeah, I could mention a couple of them. So the biggest change that came with this update was a shift in the change the game state rule to a more it's intended to be a more palatable interpretation of a valid target rule. And I think Caleb and Tony would probably have plenty to say on this subject, but what I remember, we started talking in those terms when we change the game state questions. I think it was Caleb who first said that answering the specific rules question we were given, it was if Gamora could play one of her attack events when the Nebula villain has multiple wide stances attached. in order to trigger a different effect of hers. And the question was, does that count as something changing the game state? To which Caleb had started explaining it as the thought of there's a valid target for playing an attack event, and because playing this attack event would also have a secondary effect of some kind, the thought of that card having a valid target means it should be able to be played, and in the interest of player empowerment, which is one of the main things we are looking for when we make rulings like this. So that was a big one. It was back in actually July or so. We started on this valid target language, and then we realized that it would be probably a good fit for the game based on the types of questions we were getting in that category. Additionally, the take versus deal damage distinction had come up from some of those conversations, one of which I remember was the Adam Warlock Karmic Blast. Someone asked an interesting question about if the target couldn't actually, if all the 4 damage couldn't be applied to the target, did you pay the cost? To which we said, it makes sense, you should be able to play it even if it defeats the target. With the initial 4 damage, for example. And also defend the new defense rules, the defend and defense update. We've done a lot of work to that one to try and make, especially the defense cards the new ones that we've designed and released, and these products work a little bit differently or more creatively, I would say, than some defense events have previously. For instance, the Mutant Protectors card got a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And a lot of the questions we got there informed a lot of what the defend and defense update is now. For instance, that only one character at a time can defend an attack, and also that it's possible for if a player's ally is defending, they can also play a defense event. Yes, again, in the interest of player empowerment and certain combos that we thought should be allowed.
Yeah, that makes sense. The defense roll isn't shifting back and forth, but you're not preventing people from still using some of their defense cards, even if an ally is the one doing the defending.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that Alex is still friends with me after all the rules questions I created for her with my card designs. That Mutant Protectors in my head was such an exciting and simple card of like, oh yeah, I just throw out an ally and now they're the defender, and then the questions start rolling in for Alex about like, but doesn't the defense make my hero the defender? Like, how does that work? And we had a lot of conversations about that one. And you're still pretty new at the studio, so welcome to the team. Hope you survived the experience, as the X-Men books always say.
So Caleb, tell us about, so it sounds like the distinction went from change of game state to valid target. Is that kind of the main crux of what you were talking about a year or so ago?
Yep, that was just in the interest of trying to come up with a rule that was perhaps simpler and more intuitive. The change of the game state rule is sort of like a legacy rule from some of our competitive LCGs, where it was an important rule in those games to sort of settle disputes where, if you've ever played a competitive card game, people love to try to find these little, you call them cheats. They're not actually cheating, but, little tricks, ways to manipulate the rules, ways to catch your opponent off guard, to find a way to trigger an ability when you don't think it would be possible, and so on. And so it would just, arguments will erupt at the tables if it's like a tournament setting and, there's real stakes and some might say you can't do that, just in order to trigger this ability. And so, the change the game state rule kind of came out of that as a way of sort of settling those disputes of like, no, you can't just play this card for no reason other than to trigger this ability over here because it's not changing the game state in a valid way, yada, yada. It served a purpose in those games where it did its job, but in a cooperative game where people aren't trying to one up the other people at the table, typically, it didn't really have the same function we found. Instead, it was just causing a lot of people to write questions going, does this count as changing the game state?
Right.
Does
right.
this count as changing the game state? Like how does that work? And it basically kind of came down to, there's no one on the other side of the table arguing for why it does or doesn't. It's just up to the players as a group to kind of figure it out for themselves. And we thought, well, it's not a competitive game. That's not really necessary here. Let's shift focus to, is there a valid target for this ability?
Mhm.
Because that's something all the players as a group can sort of agree to fairly intuitively. Like to Alex's point, like, I want to play an attack event. Maybe Nebula has enough cards in play that this attack is going to do 0 damage. And therefore it raises the question of like, is that changing the game state? But there's no question that there's a valid target for that ability. If I want to play a card that says deal 3 damage to the villain, there's a villain in play. So I know I can play this card.
Mhm.
And I've been pretty gratified to see the response to that people are more or less saying, yeah, it does help just to know, like, hey, if there's a target, if I want to do damage to a minion and there's a minion in play, I can play this card that damages a minion, whether it's tough or whether there's an ability that's going to cancel this effect. There's at least a valid target that I can initiate this effect. So I hope as the game continues to grow, that continues to make things easier for people, because we had a lot of great discussion in the background. Tony, Alex, and I really parsing through this and weighing the pros and cons, and then deciding the best way to write that rule and to word that, and that ultimately fell to Tony to take point on that and figure out. It's one thing to say, yeah, valid target rule, no problem. It's another thing to like write it,
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a real team effort, and hopefully it's going to pay off for us in the long run.
Yeah, if there's one thing that we'd like to make come across with this this interview, it's that every rules question we sit and we consider very carefully. And there are often cases where it comes down to, we just need to decide which way it goes, because there's valid arguments in multiple directions. And when it comes down to those kind of coin flip scenarios, we usually rule in favor of player empowerment, making the players feel heroic and allowing them to do the things they want to do.
I mean, it's the best part of Marvel Champions. Whenever like I get to teach it to people or show it to people, like just the fact that people, like a lot of people just get confused in terms of when can I flip, when can I use my basic power, when can I play an event, and they tie all of those things in together, but they're all mutually exclusive, and that to me is just what makes it feel so neat. Like I can flip to alter ego, play this event, and exhaust to recover. Like I can do all 3 of those things, even if I barely have a hand of cards, And I just think that's such a neat part of the game.
Yeah.
I think there is an exception to the valid target, right? Which is getting rid of stunned and confused. Did that pop in there? That is kind of a change in the game state versus there's a valid target. Can you talk about that, Tony?
That was like the one big exception we had, was we wanted to allow players to clear statuses even if there aren't targets. And that's more of a thematic reasoning, given that if there's no villain for you to punch, you can't become unstunned, which doesn't make any sense. You have a breather of not having a villain, say in the Sinister Six scenario.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can clear your stun. You can get over your fogginess from that big hit that you took from Doc Ock.
Got it. So that would allow me to play, say, Get Over Here, even if there isn't a minion in play, for free, just to clear my stun, right?
Right.
Would be the idea.
The minion is not a cost of playing that card. If pulling the minion to you was a cost, you would not be able to do it. But because there's no cost other than the resource cost of that card, you can play it as an attack event to clear a stun.
Yeah, I like that. I like the thematic way you said that too. Like if there aren't any villains or whatever it is, or I have this breather, I'm still spending whatever the expected like resource cost is. So whether that represents time or energy or whatever it is to regain, to regain my ground or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I'm super excited to use my Get Over Here's to clear my stuns in aggression, because I don't want to be stunned when I'm in aggression. That's for sure.
Totally.
All right. What kind of player feedback did you use? I mean, maybe this is kind of already baked into what we've talked about, and obviously Alex probably has a good feeling here, but what feedback did you use? Like, can you think of some specific things that you were using And I guess, Tony, you even alluded to using playtesters for feedback on the rules update and rules questions.
Mm-hmm.
Either one of you there.
I got one example that comes to mind was with the canceled attacks, specifically as they like apply to the card Grasping Tendrils from the Venom Hero pack. That was one we kind of went back and forth on, because it was a case of canceling an attack, but the event is a defense traded event. So what did that mean? And because is canceling the attack mean it wasn't initiated, that the attack didn't happen, but then did your character still defend? That was one. Yes, we got tester feedback, but also we got plenty of player questions on. And I think I like where we ended up with that one. I believe the ruling was, yes, the character still defended, but the attack, was it the attack initiated but didn't resolve? I
believe so.
I think that's it. So yeah, that's another example I got from my list. Tony, can you think of another maybe?
Not specific, but just as I mentioned before, basically anytime we get multiple rules questions on the same topic, that is something that I'll note down to myself that, oh, we should address this in some way in the upcoming update to the rules reference, whether that's updating some entry in the rules reference or putting an FAQ in the back of it.
My favorite thing is when we get 2 rules questions at almost the exact same time. And it's the same question, but they're arguing for a different answer. And then you know, okay, somewhere on Discord, somewhere on Facebook, somewhere is an argument happening. And we're getting pulled into the middle of it. That's whenever I see those, I'm like, okay, pump the brakes. Let's make sure we answer this real carefully before we're gonna upset somebody. There's gonna be a whole side of this argument that's upset with us. So let's make sure we really dig into this one.
But those submitted rules questions plus your playtester group is where you're getting the bulk of this. You're not hunting the Discords, the Facebook groups, the live streamers. You're not looking through those per se. So mostly questions will get submitted that were community generated in those places and then sent to you, right?
Primarily, yeah. I'm on various social medias, mostly as a lurker, just to kind of get a pulse of what the community is saying. And sometimes something will strike a chord with the community, and I make note of that. A recent example was there was a pretty in-depth debate about whether you can recover while at full health under the new valid target rules. And so that is going to be one thing that is going to go into the next update. That was a question we got and put the answer out there. And the answer was no. If you are at full health, you cannot make a basic recovery. So your spider hams won't be able to get your free tune counters, and your phoenixes won't be able to get her free power counters from recovering while at full health.
Oh man, that's it. I'm getting rid of my downtimes.
Yeah,
nice, but if you can recover 1, you're good, right?
Yes, as long as you can recover at least 1 damage, then your hero or your identity is a valid target for the recovery. And the reason we made that ruling was to be in line with the same thing with basic attack and basic thwart. You can't do a basic attack or basic thwart without a valid target unless you are removing a status.
Right. Yeah, I hear that language already, the valid target language, and I already see myself shifting. And it's a nice change from does the state of the game change, which again sounds very clear, but it's more nebulous than is there a valid target, you know?
Yeah, we thought so.
To take on that question, Brandt, of like where we're finding like the rules questions to answer, I just want to give a shout out to our testers. Tony had mentioned them. They're very involved in the community as well, and so they often bring these questions to us. They do so much more than just play test our content. You know, they will quite often like say, hey, we've noticed in our group, or we've noticed online, people have questions about this thing, or whatever it might be. They're very involved in the community in the game, and so they're great about calling stuff out and bringing it to our attention. So we really appreciate that and love to take the opportunity to let them know.
Yeah, totally.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's such a key part of a game and keeping a game moving. And I feel like specifically when you're designing something like a card game, because you're trying to create fun and unique interactions, which naturally leads to head scratching interactions, right?
Yeah.
And that's
with champions especially. Go ahead, Tony.
I was just going to say, my feeling is if we don't have any rules questions, it feels to me like we're not pushing the boundaries enough. We're not being as exciting and as experimental as we could be.
Well said.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's it. I think I've told you both in person, but when I talk well about the game, I talk about how the heroes 43, I think there are, feel unique, and people will say, oh, Vision and Shadowcat, they both just have forms. And I'm like, play them. Like, try this deck. They don't feel the same, even though they're using a mechanism that's similar. And so I think that is huge credit to the design team, play testers, Boggs, obviously, as well. But just making all those heroes so that when I go in my box of heroes, I just pick one because I haven't played it in a while and it's going to feel different. And I don't say, well, let me not use Wasp because I just played Ant-Man. You know what I mean? They're going to be the same, and they're not. And I think that's a really cool part, which will lead to some of this, because you've got to stretch those spaces, as you were saying.
Totally.
Well, that's great to hear, though. That's definitely really important to us.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's definitely a strong point, that I hear about the game is that you have all these heroes and the different villains and whatnot. So, all right. So how often can we anticipate these rules updates? Is this going to be a regular thing going forward, something that we can set our watches to, or do you think it's just going to be an as needed basis, as a certain amount of product releases and is needed?
It's probably going to be an as we have time to do it kind of thing.
Yeah.
It really comes down to, do I design a new thing that you all can be playing with, or do I update the rules reference? And we try as much as we can to do both, but sometimes it's just there's not enough time to do both. I would like to, in a perfect world, do them more frequently than we have. That way we can maybe put out smaller ones so it doesn't feel like a third of the rules are new because it's all red text. But I can't make any promises on that at this point.
All right. So we'll see where things go. All right. I just have a couple things that I've seen in the community that I'm still just going to kind of throw out there. I actually have one that I think might be a question you can answer here. So particularly something like Moon Girl. So I actually remember Moon Girl came in the Ironheart pack that released at the first Con of Heroes. And we were there and we were overpaying for Moon Girl, right? Yeah. Sometimes in excess of 7-8 resources, mental resources, to draw that number of cards. And certainly that was silly. It was fun to do, kind of like a Go for Champions thing. It was fun to do, but it was a little ridiculous. But now the rule has been put in place, which I believe, Alex, you had answered pretty quickly after Ironheart came out, that, or maybe it was somebody else, I can't remember, that, you don't gain the benefit for overpaying. So like this overpay can give you overkill, with a rocket or something like that, but you can't gain the benefits. But I'm intrigued why it went that way versus putting something like limit of 3 on Moon Girl. Would you happen to know why? And it's okay if you don't on the spot. Rather than limiting her, creating an overpay rule, which makes some other tricky situations with like things that have required cost, or like Wasp and Ant-Man allies, for those kind of things.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it was there were a couple other cards in addition to Moon Girl who had for each resource you pay for the cost. I want to say there's an ally injustice that confuses a minion for each thing you pay for their cost, or something like
Eros.
that. So rather than having to put a limit on each of these cards, we decided just to that we felt it was clear enough that if you're overpaying for something, then you haven't technically paid that for the card. And it does create a little bit of confusion maybe with the zero cost Ant-Man and Wasp cards, but we felt that this was the best direction to go with that particular ruling.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's another example of trying to do a little bit of future proofing. Like, you know, you could settle it one, you know, either way for Moon Girl, but then that wouldn't settle it moving forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those zero cost allies specifically say like for each resource you overpay, right? They like use that language.
Yeah.
So the ruling we created actually addresses both, right? It's one is like you're paying for it, the other one is inviting you to overpay for it, and that's why the distinction exists in the rule book. Now, to clarify, these are two different terms with two different meanings.
Yeah. There's a funny one. This is just a funny one. So if I am Captain America in Steve Rogers form, and the other player is going first and wants to play Peter Parker, the ally that has a 3 cost requirement, one of each resource, it is now reduced by 1. And because I'm overpaying, I don't satisfy the cost and I can't play the Peter Parker ally. But again, it's just a silly interaction. Like it's a rare one. So it's a funny one to think about.
Is that correct? Because I'm pretty sure requirement. Yeah, maybe Alex, you can hop in here because I'm pretty sure requirement is a cost.
Currently, our rules are if there is a requirement cost, you can't reduce that cost and still satisfy the cost. With the Peter Parker ally, you need one of each resource. And then someone was asked, can you reduce it with helicarrier? But that's not how requirement works. Requirement does need those resources to be paid. So the ruling was that if his cost is reduced from some effect, helicarrier was just the first one that came to mind, then he can't be played at that time.
Got it. Nice.
Yeah, that more goes to the definition of requirement.
Yeah, that's more what I'm just thinking is throwing those out there. I guess the Star-Lord hero ability still is kind of like an interrupt, which would technically trigger after you play a card. So something to think about. These are just ones I saw from the community. And then the interaction between Quick Strike and Widow's Bite, which is Black Widow's upgrade card. I guess it's a little tricky there in terms of Quick Strike and then what all the orders of everything. It sounds like Quick Strike initiates, then Widow's Bite goes off, but Quick Strike doesn't finish attacking. So that's one that's still a little silly. But the one that I really want to get to, which again, I'm not asking for a response, but so many people would love to see something for what to do with signature allies when you're playing those heroes together. So we'll go back to Ant-Man and Wasp. And I know a lot of people house rule, like if I'm playing Ant-Man and Wasp, I can pull those ally cards out of my deck and swap in the team up cards. And then I get that extra effect. And I think people would love to see that as like an official variant, which I think would be really fun. But the other one that I would love to see someday is a promo card. And I'll give credit to my friend Larry, who I streamed when the channel originally started. And a promo card for a shield agent whose text is, you can swap this card with your signature ally. And it would just be like a 1/1 with 2 health or something. And so you just have something that you could swap in. Would be a fun card to see for that. And just throwing you some of the things that I see from the community as a that would be a fun place. And I know, again, a lot of people will do the house rule, but I think some kind of official thing they would get a lot of joy out of. So there's that. So, all right, I think that'll bring our 1.5 ruling update chat to an end. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. But I am going to leave you with a final question. So I will ask you the question, and then I'm going to just say a couple other things so you'll have some time to think. But I want to know, people are ready for the next evolution of this game. And so they're excited for the X-Force to come out, which we know we'll have some previews at Gen Con, which I will be there. And I believe Caleb and Tony will be there as well. So that will be fun to be able to see some of the new stuff. But I would like to know, of the villains and heroes that we know about, which one would be the most exciting, or you're most anticipating, maybe either for you or for the community to see and play with or against. But the other thing I want to say is how much I enjoyed the Mojo Mania campaign, specifically that campaign. And I would love to see more of those packs be a 3-set campaign, because I thought that was really awesome. So I wanted to give credit there on that, which I think all of you worked on, right? I think that was Boggs, Tony, and Caleb and on Mojo Mania.
Primarily Boggs and me. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I was
that
really
was
pleased
great.
with how that mini campaign turned out. Yeah.
I love it. I replay it all the time. I love just the simplicity of just keep a card in play that you had in play and keep rolling. So,
I
all right,
just
Alex,
played it last week.
you just played it?
Yeah,
Nice.
with my brother-in-law. Yeah.
That's awesome. What heroes did you use? Were you X-Men?
No, he was playing Rocket and I was playing Ironheart.
Oh, I hear people like Rocket.
Yeah.
Couple things here.
He was
All right,
doing all sorts of stuff.
What do you got for us from X-Force? What are you looking forward to?
I'd say mainly the heroes. I remember playing Domino during testing, and having a lot of fun with her. And this was, I hadn't known anything about her going in, but her mechanic was very smooth. And it's fun. It's luck. It is luck based. Discarding cards on the top of your deck for certain effects, and also the posse is a fun little gimmick of hers. I'm also excited for Psylocke. I didn't get to play her much, but I think her design is really cool, and I know she does a lot with confusing enemies and dealing damage or additional effects to those confused enemies. But mainly, I love both of their designs. I think they look really cool. I think they'll be really fun to play. So I'm looking forward to both of them.
Nice. Caleb, I'm have you go next.
Yeah, there's a lot of great heroes in this wave, and I'm particularly excited for Cable because he really focuses on the player side scheme card type, which is the new card type for this wave that we've been kind of holding back for just the right time, and we thought X-Force was the place to do it. So I think when players finally get their hands on these products and their chance to play these player side schemes and take the initiative to go and do these things, I think they're going to find them really punchy, really exciting. Not necessarily always like an auto include. It's not always the right play, but when you can suss it out, what's the right time to do it, it's very rewarding for everybody at the table. So I'm excited for people to experience that for themselves.
And it's a nice nod to Lord of the Rings, which obviously you've worked on.
Yeah, well, the feedback we
bit.
got, the feedback we got to side quests in Lord of the Rings definitely like put it on my radar from the very inception of Marvel Champions that we would eventually want to do something similar in this game. Not exactly the same because the two different games and different mechanics, but something is kind of that fills that niche.
Nice. All right, Tony, I think you were the lead on this box, correct?
Yeah.
So what are you looking forward to people seeing or playing yourself? What is it?
I'm just super excited for them to be playing the expansion at all. This was a labor of love, and I was very proud of the final product. If I had to pick one thing, I'm super excited for people to try out the campaign mode and let me know what they think of that.
Nice.
I think Tony can't say his favorite, most anticipated thing yet because it hasn't been announced yet. So I'm going to throw that out there as a tease because it's
so there's something exciting coming.
There's definitely more exciting things coming, and people should always be excited for what Tony's got up his sleeve.
That is good to know because Marvel Champions is lots of fun, and the more we add, although the one thing, the rules updates are nice, but I can't tell you now with whatever. I think it's 43 heroes and 36 villains, if I remember. Maybe it's 37 villains. Somebody will put it in the comments below, I'm sure. But it is hard for me to remember all the cards now. I used to be very good at it when there was maybe a wave or two, and now it's just hard to remember. But it's a joy, and I find myself reading the cards and remembering, forgot about this card. I just played Mysterio this morning, and I just forgot about some of the fun interactions of Mysterio and whatnot. So
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you once again for joining us. Thank you, Alex. Good to meet you. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Caleb. I will look forward to seeing you in Indianapolis very soon. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you so much for joining us here at Step Into the Portal. And if you want to see more Marvel Champions, then, like the video and subscribe to the channel, and you'll see plenty of Marvel Champions along with a whole bunch of other games. And also be sure to check out the brand new Right Brain Rollers podcast, where Eric Summer and I, every 2 weeks, talk about a whole pile of games and roll our D12 of fate to see what topic in gaming we will discuss that week. Thanks, everybody. Until next time, I'm the Brandt, and I hope you step into the portal.